Hello and welcome. You're watching Newsx with me, Devika Devan. As the world today arms up production and demand for semiconductor chips to bolster humanity's tryst with artificial intelligence, India's space agency ISRO has taken a major stride in technological self-reliance with the development of its own space-grade processor, the Vikram 3201. This journey started 3.5 years ago when Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the India Semiconductor mission on the 21st of December 2022. It was set up as an independent division within the Digital India Corporation to formulate a comprehensive long-term strategy for developing sustainable semiconductors and display India's manufacturing capabilities. Among other key objectives of this mission was to promote indigenous intellectual property generation in this field, as well as to enable cutting-edge research. Here's what the Prime Minister had announced for India and its ambitions. Of this mission was to promote indigenous intellectual property generation and, like I said, enable cutting-edge research. The Semiconductor lab in Mohali, established in 1976, was modernized to a brownfield fabricator, and while it has contributed to critical space missions like the Mangalyaan mission, the Vikram 3201 is the most advanced semiconductor manufactured by India till date. Designed and fabricated entirely in our country, the 32-bit processor has already been flight validated on the PSLV mission. What sets Vikram apart is not the raw speed, but its distinctive performance, the radiation-hardened design and reliability under extreme conditions, which is critical for launch vehicle navigation and control. Developed on a 180 nanometer space-grade processor at the Semiconductor lab in Mohali, it marks India's ability to produce secure sovereign hardware for its space program. Anyway, that's a lot of technical jargon there for our viewers, but we want to really process it down to what this moment means for India. So I'm going to just now quickly go across to our guests. We have with us Mr. Faisal Kabusa, Chief Analyst and Co-founder at Tech Arc, Mr. Arun Mamfizi, Semiconductor professional author, Dr. Sharad Kohli, economist, with us as well. Let me, like I said, bring in Mr. Arun Mamfizi. Mr. Mamfizi, I want to understand from you. Like I said, there was a lot of technical jargon in what I was reading out, and not everyone would understand what any of this means. So if you could please firstly explain to our viewers, why are we even having this conversation today? What's the big change and what pivot has India's development taken with the development of the Vikram processor?
Yeah, hi Devika. So the way I look at it is today, tomorrow and day after there is a Semicon conference happening in Delhi, and this is the fourth of its kind, the fourth edition of the India Semicon. And really speaking, I think this became news because of that chip being presented to the Prime Minister and so on and so forth. This chip itself was probably fabricated and presented to ISRO back in March of 2025. And honestly, this is definitely not India's first semiconductor chip or something. SAL, as you said in the introduction, has been fabricating chips since the 1980s. Neither is it probably India's most advanced chip, because this was 32-bit and there is already a 64-bit Iris that ISRO, I think in collaboration with IIT Madras, developed using another architecture. Having said that, and one more point before I get back into Vikram, there are many more other things. For example, over the last 26 months, we have approvals and incentives from the central government for 8 packaging units, commercial high volume 8 packaging units, one big silicon based fab and one small silicon carbide based fab. These, in my opinion, is much more bigger developments and should have been much more highlighted. For some reason, I think the whole jargon of first chip or first of its kind ISRO chip and all got more attention. But be as it may, back to the Vikram. As you said, let's not get into the technical jargons there, but essentially it's a custom-made chip for ISRO's use for harsh conditions, because in space you have temperatures, pressures, and whatnot, which are much different from normal use. And so this is as a custom-made chip. And I believe this very concept of the very chip was there in a slightly previous version of a 16-bit, which basically is previous generation, if you want to call. And now it's come out as a 32-bit, which again is not the most sophisticated of the chips. There are 64-bit is much more common, but for ISRO's application, which is a specific one, 32-bit is good enough. And they've come out with it for the first time, and as you said, flight validated, so it's actually tested and proved. So that's the speciality. But I think it's only a small bit in the bigger picture of India's semiconductor journey having truly started, and
Okay.
in
And
the
then
ramp.
I'll come to the bigger picture in just a moment as well. But Mr. Kavusa, I want to bring you into the conversation. I want to understand from your perspective, sir, how does the development of a Vikram chip by ISRO's Semiconductor Lab improve India's self-reliance in both space as well as, I'm assuming, in the future defense as well?
Hi, first of all, good evening, everyone. So, as my dear friend Arun said, so yes, there has been already, history, and we have made chips earlier also. But what had happened over a period of time, that there was a kind of lull and pause in this process. And there was I would use to the extent that there was a big question mark on, can India do it? Okay. Over the past 10 years, 15 years, we have been hearing about there's a fab coming up. There is, India will have its own chips. So I think from that point of view, yes, it's a significant milestone that, today we are able to show that, yes, now the chip is back. We are back into the business of making chips. Yes, I would agree with Arun. It's not the first one. Now, on the, point of what does it mean for our, self-sustenance in this very, important and strategic domain. So, this kind of chip is used in a very harsh, condition. And at least, today we can say that, okay, we are capable of making chips for such harsh conditions. So, which also, talk about not only our, design capabilities, but also, talks about our fabrication, I would say, capabilities out there. So from that point of view, yes, I think, this is an important and significant step, but yes, of course, not the first one.
Okay, Sharad Kohli, bringing you into the conversation. Sharad, not the first chip, but certainly not going to be the last, and that's the larger conversation that I want to have with you. Yes, our experts are right that this is not the first nor the most advanced, but a critical step that we've taken today. We are living in an era, Sharad, where there is a lot of concern about geopolitical vulnerabilities, about supply chain disruptions. Who knows who's going to wake up tomorrow and say we don't want to supply XYZ to India. Keeping that in mind, Sharad, how critical is this moment?
Good evening, Devika. Good evening to my fellow panelists and Newsx viewers. Extremely critical, I would say. And, the call given from the ramparts of Red Fort by Prime Minister of Swadeshi, obviously the call was given for Atmanirbhar Bharat back in 2020 after COVID, during COVID rather, when Prime Minister wanted us not to be dependent on imports. But this time the call given was for exports as well, after what the mayhem that America has caused across the world because of the tariffs. Extremely critical, because if you look at Taiwan, you look at Korea, look at China, look at America, and look at, to a certain extent, some of the European countries, who control the Semicon market, the chip market as of now, more than $700 billion, heading very rapidly to $1 trillion mark as far as the global economy is concerned. And we realize the importance of these chips in the electronic stuff that we use on a day-to-day basis. We are not just talking of space. We are looking at a broader picture of the overall. I mean, this is the brain of any high-profile electronic device. So with 10 units being approved in India, they're coming on the ground. Of course, we're going to have the first chip hopefully by the end of this year. Extremely, extremely critical, because the country has learned the hard way. First from China some time ago, when they strangulated us on our tunnel boring machines. They strangulated us on fertilizer, dipotassium phosphate for rabi crops. Then they strangulated us on the rare magnets. Of course, a little bit of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai concept is coming back to the fore. We are more friendly. President attended the SCO summit, and direct flight starting, Kailash Mansarovar happening. Things are getting closer, although you can't trust China at all times, but things seem to be getting better. So, and then on export, look what America has done. We've taken a hit of a major part of our merchandise. So I think being self-dependent, being Atmanirbhar is the way to go forward. In fact, yesterday, while the SCO summit was on, I was with your managing editor, Rishabh Gulati, and I emphasized on another technological aspect. This, of course, is the Semicon, which is, again, high-tech. But I emphasize on the digital part of it. When I did give an example of Coup. There used to be a Twitter-like, micro-blogging platform here. If you remember, it used to be called Coup. And ultimately, it could not survive because it ran out of funding. So I think the need of the hour is that the Indian technology, whether with regard to space, chip, semiconductor, but we also need to be the medium through which I'm connected to your show right now. We look at Meta, we look at Alphabet, we look at Amazon, we look at so many other things that we use on a day-to-day basis vis-a-vis the digital part of our life. I think we need to indigenously develop those platforms. Also, what if tomorrow, because of some reason, what if, Donald Trump's mind further gets into a spin? He says, people, you will get into a spin. What if his own mind gets into a spin? And he says, thank you very much, no more Alphabet for India. Or probably we land up in a situation where we have to ban for some reason, the way China has done. You can't have a Meta in China, you don't have a Google in China, but China is still doing very well. It's got its own Weibo and things like that. I think it is high time that India's technology, and the dichotomy is that these very companies that I named, these very tech platforms which I named, they are being run by Indian minds in America. The head of Alphabet is an Indian. The key people in Microsoft are Indians. The CEO is Indian. I've got a whole list of company where Indians, and plus the Indians techies who are working there. If the same techies and the same minds can develop something within India, so we don't have to depend on the platform in which me and you are connected right now, on the overseas digital technology, I think I'll be happier at that point of time. Okay. But this is welcome. We've learned the hard way what shortage of chips can do to us. I remember when car Q bookings were for 6 months or 1 year. So the broader picture is indeed very, very welcoming. And okay. I think it's a very welcome step. We need to press the accelerator, Devika, without a doubt.
Okay, Sharad, that's an interesting point that you raised. Mr. Mamvazi, I want to bring you in on that. Because there's a lot of conversation that we have as far as tech is concerned, that heads of most of the global tech giants are all Indians, and there's brain drain from India. What's the one thing that we perhaps don't address is that there are certain conditions that are created in those countries where these companies, these tech giants are operating. But I want to understand from your perspective, we also now have companies like AMD and Lam Research that are investing really heavily in India. But what are the key challenges as well as opportunities for creating a very complete and sustainable semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem? That's the big question to ask at this juncture, because as Mr. Kavusa was also pointing out, that there was a lull period as far as the conversation around semiconductors was concerned.
So I think 2 or 3 points that you raised, on which the shortest answer from my side would be on the non-semiconductor but digital apps and so on, like Dr. Sharath was saying about Coup. Honestly, that's a bit of a confusing area for me, because, for example, Coup, in my opinion, partly also collapsed because it was too India-centric. All the Indian politicians and celebrities, or some celebrities, joined it, but there was no Americans, there was nobody else, and what's the fun? I mean, you can't compare it with an X, the Twitter, right? So at the same time, something which is like TikTok that China does was a hit in spite of it, heavily being Chinese. So I don't really understand that part. Maybe there are more nuances to it than just meets the eye. But definitely, I think as a country, we don't have a history of facilitating some of these big entrepreneurships and products. For example, for some reason our mindset went into a service mode. Somebody else makes something and we will service it for you, and we will do the back-end support. We need to change that mindset, and I'm glad the younger generation, I think, they have that risk-taking ability. I think in 10 or 20 years down the line, we will start seeing the impact of it. The second point in terms of the semiconductor ecosystem, look, we have missed 50, 60 years. So we can't make up for that in 5 or 10 years. It is going to take time. So we have to be patient. All the equipment manufacturers that are striking some deals with India, for example, Lam Research, by the way, Lam Research probably have been around in India for about 20 years. What they do mostly is a bit of a back-end support, engineers. They also need CAD, computer aided design, and so on and so forth. So that's the talent that's easily available in India. The real test, the litmus test would be if any of them is actually going to put up a manufacturing facility in India directly or in collaboration with an Indian company, just like the fabs are coming up. And likewise, the chemicals and so, chemical industry and the other supply chain elements. And that leads to me to the final point. The previous lull was between an epsilon and a zero. It was SCL was a small facility, and then it almost went into big losses and so on. And now we have the second wave, not just driven by SCL, but driven by private entities, 10 units being approved and so on and so forth. It might not still get us into the top 10 or, maybe top 10, but top 5 is tough. Yet it's a very solid beginning. But what I would also like to bring to attention is the potential of a second lull, because the first set of incentives is all given to these 10 companies. And there's been a lot of talk about ISM 2.0, the India Semiconductor Mission second phase, including incentives. Some say compared to last time, it is going to be 50% more, $15 billion and so on and so forth. But it's not yet come forth. And in that, the talk is that a lot of the supply chain elements, there'll be incentivization to manufacture these chemicals inside India, equipments, even if smaller scale and so on and so forth. So we really look forward to that. I really hope that the government doesn't lose the momentum that it has right now. And the second phase of the semiconductor incentive scheme and the policy is going to come out soon. And we don't see any more lulls, and we'll just keep, seeing a upward going trajectory.
Okay, on that note, I want to bring back Mr. Faisal Kabusa into the conversation. Mr. Kabusa, I want to then understand from you, in your understanding, what specific government policies beyond the India Semiconductor Mission are truly needed to ensure that India's local market can reach that projected $100 billion valuation by 2030? That's the vision that we've set for ourselves.
Sure. So see, India is now participating on both sides. So the consumer market journey was already on there, and it has been growing ever since. We have seen how exponentially smartphones have grown in the country. And then, other gadgets have also added to it. Also now with EVs coming in, that has become another, a potential area which adds to this consumption. Now so the consumption side is already getting addressed to a fair amount. Now what we need is to further strengthen the supply side. India's participation in the supply side has just begun, and we need to, look at what are additional areas where we can strengthen and, build it in a holistic way. For instance, while we have exports oriented, incentives already in the form of PLI, we have a design link incentive already, so that, promotes design. But there is also need to look at how can we, so as to say, nurture small researchers and small entrepreneurs who want to foray in this area. I was really surprised. I was recently in Kashmir, and I am associated with the university over there. And one student came up to me and said, I want to design a chip. So, do we have a platform for such people? That's something we need to look at, in addition to how we are, incentivizing and inviting the larger and big players. So, there has to be a system where we can, combine both large players and the small aspirants together. I think that's one of the areas which definitely needs to be looked into.
Okay, very interesting point raised there. Sharad, I want you to build on that because you were just talking about some of the brightest minds that are working in countries across the world, including the United States of America, primarily the US. But how can India address this global, we can call it a talent gap in the semiconductor design as well as fabrication sector to support some of the growing number of projects and investments that we definitely want to bring into our country as well? What is it that the government should do?
Well, if I look backwards to what you asked, Mr. Kabucha, then where are the challenges? The challenges, as far as a semicon manufacturer or a semicon researcher is concerned, you need, this is a capital-intensive industry. There's no doubt about it. I think so. The very first thing needs is financing, because right now, whosoever has gotten into it is either funding, equity, or supported by here and there. But if the funding becomes easier, I think that is the first step. Second step is clearances. We all know that chip manufacturing needs a lot of water. Then there's a lot of waste management which needs to be handled. So you need to earmark the areas within the country. So we don't have to be on a search, on a hunt mission here and there. They should be earmarked, ready to serve kind of areas, single window clearances, R&D. Now I'll come to your question. I went into a techie's mind, that what makes him disappear from the country? What makes him look at America or look at any other part, mostly America? I think there are 2-3 things which were in common to all of them said. One is career prospects, that we have a very bright prospect if we go and settle in America. So they say. I mean, I may or may not agree with that. Second is the level of compensation. Third, what they say is quality of life. And of course, fourth, what they say that for their children and all that, for the education. So these were the 3-4 common things. So if we address these 4 things together as a country, as a government policy for that matter, I think we will be able to retain. Although I'm very hopeful with what Donald Trump is doing to America. I won't be surprised if a lot of these techies start looking homewards. You will find many of them coming home. You never know what's cooking in his mind. There's a new thought process every day, every afternoon, every evening. But assuming that there is a status quo as of now, I think we address these 3-4 areas as a matter of government policy, because you need skilled labor for Semicon. Semicon cannot go forward. And, I can tell you that the 10 projects which are getting underway, and some of them already on the ground, we've got Vikram 32 coming. But some of them which are getting underway are finding it difficult to collect the talent pool. It's becoming very hard to get the right kind of people. And this is a labor intensive, apart from being capital intensive, you need a lot of high skilled labor. So I think training that manpower, preparing them for the future, making sure that their compensation matches. If they were recruited by a TSMC or by Samsung or NVIDIA, you have to match that compensation, and you have to give them the same. So see, if somebody's got the skill, I think it deserves to be compensated. So, and a career as well, because they go out for career, they go out for, obviously, quality of life is a matter of most government policy in improving the standard of living. But what most of them say, that if you got a lot of money in this country, then this country is the best place to stay. So I think if you compensate them well, then I think quality of life aspect is taken care of automatically. So I think those are the challenges which need to be addressed. Apart from PLIs, apart from direct government support, incentives, subsidies to these semicon units, you have to simultaneously address the manpower, the human resource aspect, because without them, whatever a number of $1 billion we invest in, after all, we need people to run it. So I think R&D, human resource is a very, very important aspect. And this I am very confidently telling you, after talking to some of the finest minds in Semicon, especially the projects I can see, Mr. Kabucha or Mr. Arun would agree to me or disagree to me, I'm not sure. But I am very confident of what I'm saying. This needs to be addressed immediately, Devika.
Okay, I want to bring in Mr. Mamfazi's point of view on the same as well. Mr. Mamfazi, in your perspective, how do we address the gap as far as the brains, the talent and other such issues may be concerned? I'm not saying that there's a dearth of it, but the dearth actually lies in finding and honing some of these talents and skills in India.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Sharath on there is definitely challenge in terms of finding the right talent and so on. And there's also, the ecosystem is still developing. And for example, the fab is in Dholera, which is, quite away from a city. And so there are efforts to develop housing for them and so on and so forth. It is going to take time. But I also want to add one point to Faisal's comment on the young aspiring R&D students and so on. The linking factor is actually the academia. And unfortunately, I must say, a lot of them are not well connected to the industry. And to some extent it's understandable because there is no industry or there was no industry in India. But the academia has to take that extra step, go beyond their papers and publications and so on and so forth, which might get them a promotion. But you have to also look at it from there in a perspective of preparing their students industry ready. And if, in my opinion, if the government can also look into, don't decide on promotions in IITs and so on and so forth purely on the basis of papers published. Honestly, 90% of them are useless papers. I mean, useless from an industry standpoint. Make them, incentivize them for more industry solutions, for which they need to first understand what are the challenges in the industry, for which again they need to understand how the industry works, which in many cases is very different from how a lab works. So this would be my quick comment, or the shortest comment on this aspect.
Okay, all right. I want to leave the last word with Mr. Faisal Kabusa. Mr. Kabusa, I also want to understand from your perspective, what do you think, looking ahead, what role can public-private partnerships also play in accelerating research and development to really keep pace with a technology that is rapidly evolving in the semiconductor industry?
So yes, I think there is immense potential in having a public-private partnership over here. While in the government is also a consumer, so there's a lot of consumption and very strategic consumption happening now with newer technologies and emerging technologies like AI already at our door. So a lot of transformation is happening and is going to happen in future. So now adding computer or compute to my overall I would say landscape and work processes is not a choice. It's not an option that anybody has it. So is the case with government, be it on the on the strategic areas like defense or otherwise in the governance. We need to have a deeper penetration of compute. We need to have deeper penetration of intelligent and smart devices, and for that we need to have very custom and application specific chipsets or chips, like for instance as the case of Vikram. So that kind of collaboration is very much required, where I think government will come in with a use case, with a very specific use case, and at the same time also be able to put in that initial money, which will then have a multiplier effect, and you will see a private sector participation also happening there. So that's on the one side. The other side is academia industry, of course. So what is my understanding and what I have observed so far is that there is industry is expecting that academia prepares and comes I would say industry ready to them. Industry is more than willing to support, more than willing to cooperate, more than willing to help out. But academia has to come and be industry ready and industry prepared. That's not happening. Academia is still believing that industry, we will just reach out to industry and industry is going to help us. That's not the case. Industry is at the end of the day for profit, accountable to board. So they have to think where they are investing their time and other resources. So for that, academia has to come up again and do some more homework. And I'm sure industry is going to help out there. Regarding skilling, yes, long term we will always say that there's a need to relook our syllabi and look at the entire academic process. But in the short term, I think only academia can only industry can help out through very active engagement and collaboration.
Okay, all right. On that note, I've run out of time, but I thank all of our guests for joining us on the broadcast to take that conversation forward. We leave it there.